right after my daughter left for a business trip, leaving behind my paralyzed grandson. But my grandson jumped up from his wheelchair and said, "Grandpa, Mom wants to hurt you." I was shocked, staring at my 12-year-old grandson, the child I thought had been completely paralyzed for the past 6 months, standing firmly in front of me. That's when I realized I was living in a cruel play, where my daughter was acting as the devoted child. Now I had to face the most painful decision of my life: send my own daughter to prison or let her go free. Thank you for being here. Before we begin, have you ever trusted someone completely only to discover they weren't who you thought? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This is a fictional story exploring family and betrayal. Any resemblance to real events is coincidental, but the emotional truths resonate deeply. Let's go back 6 months. The rain drummed against the windows of my library, a steady Portland rhythm I'd grown to love over 40 years in this house. I sat in the leather chair by the fireplace, a glass of bourbon untouched on the side table. 6 months had passed since that call, the one that brought my daughter back into my life, and nearly took everything from me. I'm Bradley Pierce, 68 years old, and until that November evening, I'd been living with the weight of being right when I desperately wished I'd been wrong. 13 years ago, my daughter Natalie came to me with news that should have been joyful. She was 23, pregnant, and engaged to a man named Scott Reynolds. She brought him to dinner at this house, and I watched him carefully, the way he spoke over her, the way his charm seemed rehearsed, the way his eyes went cold when he thought no one was looking. After they left, I made some calls. I'd built a hotel empire worth $160 million by knowing when something didn't add up, and Scott Reynolds didn't add up. Within a week, I learned he'd been fired from 2 previous jobs for aggressive behavior, that he had a gambling problem, that his previous girlfriend had filed, then dropped a restraining order. I told Natalie everything. I begged her not to marry him. "He's changed, Dad." She'd set her hand on her swollen belly. "People can change. He loves me. He loves our baby." "He's dangerous," I'd replied. "I know men like him. Please don't do this." The argument that followed was the worst we'd ever had. She called me controlling, said I'd never approved of anyone she dated, that I saw threats everywhere because I trusted no one. And maybe she was right about some of it. But I was right about Scott Reynolds. She married him anyway. 3 weeks later, she moved to California with him and told me she didn't want me in her life anymore or in Caleb's life. For 13 years, we barely spoke. A phone call on holidays, a brief text on birthdays. She never let me meet my grandson, never sent more than one blurry photo. And every year I wondered if I'd been wrong, if my interference had cost me my family for nothing. Then came that call. I'd been finishing dinner when my phone lit up a California number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Dad." Her voice was barely a whisper choked with tears. "Daddy, it's me." My fork clattered against the plate. 13 years of silence, and now this. "Natalie, what's wrong?" "You were right." She was sobbing now. "You were right about Scott. You were right about everything, and I didn't listen, and now, Dad, I'm so sorry. I need help. Please." She told me Scott had been hurting her for years, that she'd hidden it, ashamed to admit I'd been right, that 3 days ago, he'd hurt Caleb, their son, my grandson, so badly that the 12-year-old boy couldn't walk anymore. Couldn't move at all. "The doctors say the damage might be permanent," she whispered. The room tilted. I'd been right about Scott Reynolds, but being right felt like ashes in my mouth when the cost was my grandson's future. "Where are you?" I asked, already standing. "Still in California. I left him, but I don't have anywhere to go. I know I said terrible things to you. I know I didn't listen. But Dad, I'm scared and I don't know who else to call." "Come home," I said firmly. "Both of you. Tonight." I'll wire you money for plane tickets right now. Dad, Natalie listened to me. I was angry for a long time. Angry that you didn't listen, that I lost 13 years with you and Caleb, but none of that matters now. You're my daughter. Come home. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hung up and immediately started making arrangements, tickets, a car service, medical equipment for Caleb. My hands were shaking, but not from age, from something darker than hope, from guilt. I'd been right about Scott Reynolds, but I'd been so harsh in my warning, so controlling in my approach, that I'd pushed Natalie straight into his arms. If I'd handled it differently, would she have listened? Would Caleb be whole? If I'd known then what that phone call would reveal, what my being right had cost my grandson, what it would force the boy to become to survive. I don't know if I could have lived with myself. Tomorrow they would arrive. Tomorrow I would meet the grandson I'd never been allowed to know. Tomorrow I would see what my rightness had wrought. I drained the bourbon and set the glass down, listening to the rain. Tomorrow my life would change forever. 2 days later, I stood at the front gate of the house, my hands gripping the iron bars as a yellow cab turned into the circular driveway. The afternoon sky was overcast, typical for Portland in late November, and a light mist hung in the air. My heart hammered in my chest, not from anxiety, but from something I hadn't felt in over a decade: anticipation. The cab stopped in front of the main entrance. The back door opened, and Natalie stepped out first. She looked thinner than I remembered her face, drawn with exhaustion. But when her eyes met mine, I saw something I hadn't seen in 13 years: vulnerability. Then I saw him. The driver was helping someone out of the other side, a boy in a wheelchair. My grandson, Caleb. I walked down the steps, slowly, trying to process what I was seeing. He was small for 12. His body folded into the chair at an unnatural angle. His head tilted to one side, resting against a padded support, his neck unable to hold itself straight, and his arms lay motionless in his lap, thin and pale. He wore a simple gray hoodie and jeans, but the clothes hung loose on his frame, as if they'd been bought for a different child, one who could run and play. But it was his eyes that stopped me, dark brown like his mother's, clear and bright, tracking my movement as I approached. They were the only part of him that seemed alive, that seemed aware. Everything else about him appeared frozen, trapped in a body that no longer responded. Dad. Natalie's voice broke through my shock. She was crying, her hands pressed to her mouth. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for keeping him from you. I'm sorry for everything. I pulled my gaze from Caleb and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. The bruise on her left cheek was fading to yellow, and I could see the way she held her right arm carefully, as if it still hurt. Scott Reynolds had done this. To her. To Caleb. I opened my arms, and she collapsed into them, sobbing against my chest. It's okay, I whispered, though nothing about this was okay. You're home now. Both of you. You're safe. We stood there for a long moment, Natalie crying and me holding her until I felt her pull back and wipe her eyes. Let me introduce you, she said softly. She wheeled Caleb closer, and I crouched down so I was at eye level with him. Up close, I could see the faint dusting of freckles across his nose, the way his hair, dark like Natalie's, fell across his forehead. Caleb, Natalie said gently, this is your grandfather, Grandpa Bradley. Hi, Caleb, I said, my voice thick. I've waited a long time to meet you. He couldn't respond, of course. Couldn't nod or smile or reach out, but his eyes stayed on mine, steady and intense, and I had the strangest feeling that he was studying me, measuring me somehow. I reached out and carefully took his hand. It was cold and limp, no squeeze of acknowledgement, no movement at all. I'm so glad you're here, I told him. I'm going to take care of you. Both of you. I promise. Those eyes never left mine. Inside, I showed them the rooms I'd prepared. For Natalie, the guest suite on the second floor with its view of the rose garden. For Caleb, the first-floor bedroom I'd converted hospital bed with adjustable controls, a ceiling lift system, a bathroom with a roll-in shower. I'd spared no expense. Dad, this is... Natalie's voice cracked. This is too much. It's not enough, I said firmly. But it's a start. That night, after we'd eaten a quiet dinner and Natalie had settled Caleb into bed, I stood in the hallway outside his room. The door was cracked open, and I could hear Natalie's voice soft and low, singing a lullaby I remembered from when she was small. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Her voice was sweet, tender, full of a mother's love. I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall, feeling something warm spread through my chest. This was what I'd been missing. This was family. Tomorrow we'd start making appointments with specialists. Tomorrow we'd begin the long road of helping Caleb heal, if healing was even possible. But tonight, in this moment, I let myself feel something I hadn't felt in 13 years. Hope. 2 weeks later, I woke to the smell of fresh coffee and something sweet, pancakes maybe, or French toast. Sunlight filtered through the curtains of my bedroom, and for a moment I lay there in confusion. I hadn't smelled breakfast cooking in this house since Margaret died. Then I remembered. Natalie was here. I made my way downstairs to find the kitchen transformed into something warm and alive. Natalie stood at the stove, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. The table was set for 3 with a pitcher of orange juice and a pot of coffee already waiting. "Good morning, Dad," she said, turning to smile at me. "I hope you're hungry. I made your favorite blueberry pancakes." Over those first 2 weeks, Natalie had become everything I'd once hoped she would be. She woke early every morning to prepare breakfast, made sure I took my medications on time, and kept the house running smoothly. She was attentive and caring in ways I'd almost forgotten were possible. It felt like having my daughter back, the one I'd known before the arguments, before the 13 years of distance. She'd hired a nurse too, Carol Anderson, a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and 2 decades of experience in home health care. Carol came 5 days a week to help with Caleb's care, assisting with his physical therapy exercises, bathing, and the countless small tasks that came with caring for someone who couldn't move on their own. "Your daughter is wonderful with him," Carol told me one afternoon as we watched Natalie adjust Caleb's position in his wheelchair. "Not every parent has that kind of patience." I nodded, feeling a surge of pride. Whatever mistakes Natalie had made in the past, she was trying now. She was here and she was present, and that was what mattered. Every evening, I'd hear her voice drifting from Caleb's room as she read to him stories about dragons and knights, about children who went on adventures. Her voice was soft and steady, and sometimes I'd stand in the hallway just to listen, remembering when I used to read to her the same way. One morning, about 2 weeks in, Natalie brought me coffee in my study. I was reviewing some quarterly reports from the hotel's tedious work, but necessary. "Dad, can I ask you something?" She set the mug down on my desk and perched on the edge of the chair across from me. "Of course." "I've been thinking," she said carefully. "You're doing so much for me and Caleb, letting us stay here, paying for Carol, everything. And I want to help. I want to contribute somehow." I set down my pen. "Natalie, you don't need to." "I know," she interrupted gently. "But I want to. You're running 15 hotels, Dad. That's a lot for one person, especially at..." She stopped herself, but I knew what she'd been about to say. "Especially at your age." She wasn't wrong. The business had been weighing on me more lately, and with Natalie and Caleb here now, I'd been thinking about stepping back, enjoying what time I had left with family instead of drowning in paperwork. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. Just help with the administrative side, she said. Organizing files, reviewing contracts, maybe handling some of the day-to-day correspondence. Nothing major. I used to work in marketing. Remember, I'm good with details. It made sense. And more than that, it felt right. Like she was taking responsibility, trying to prove she'd grown up. All right, I said. I'd appreciate the help. Her face lit up. Really? Really? I'll show you where everything is. We can start tomorrow if you'd like. That afternoon, I gave her a tour of my office, showing her the filing system, explaining the different properties and their management teams. She asked smart questions, took notes, and when I handed her the keys to the filing cabinet, where I kept the financial records, she held them like they meant something. "Thank you for trusting me," she said quietly. "You're my daughter," I replied. "Of course I trust you." That night, lying in bed, I found myself thinking about how much had changed in just 2 weeks. The house felt alive again. There was laughter and conversation, the sound of Carol's cheerful greetings, and Natalie's footsteps on the stairs. Caleb's presence had brought purpose back into my days, doctor's appointments, to coordinate equipment, to research small victories, to celebrate when he seemed comfortable or at peace. I'd gotten my daughter back. After 13 years of distance and regret, she was here and she was trying, and maybe, just maybe, I'd been given a second chance to be the father I should have been all along. I closed my eyes, grateful beyond words. I had my family back. 3 months into the new year, I found myself gripping the banister halfway down the main staircase, my vision swimming the floor below, seeming to tilt and shift like the deck of a ship. I stood there for what felt like minutes, waiting for the world to steady itself. And when it finally did, I couldn't remember why I'd been going downstairs in the first place, and that was when I knew something was wrong. It had started small, forgetting where I'd set my reading glasses, losing my train of thought mid-sentence. At 68, I'd expected some of that, but this was different. The dizzy spells came without warning, sudden enough that I'd learned to sit down immediately when I felt one coming. The fatigue was crushing, like wading through deep water, just to make it from my bedroom to the kitchen. And the memory lapses were getting worse. I'd have entire conversations with Natalie about the hotels, making decisions about staffing or renovations, and the next day have no recollection of what we'd discussed. "You told me to approve the kitchen remodel at the Seattle property, remember?" she'd say gently, showing me my own signature on the paperwork. I didn't remember. I didn't remember a lot of things anymore. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just stress, the adjustment of having Natalie and Caleb in the house, the weight of managing 15 properties at my age. But as January wore on, I couldn't ignore it. The exhaustion was bone deep, making even simple tasks feel monumental. Some mornings I'd wake up feeling drugged, my thoughts thick and slow, my limbs heavy. Despite Natalie's constant presence, despite how attentive and caring she'd been, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not with her. She'd been wonderful, everything I'd hoped she would be. The problem was with me. My body was betraying me, and I didn't know why. "Dad, you should see Dr. Richards," Natalie suggested one morning after I'd nearly fallen getting out of my chair. "These dizzy spells are getting worse." She was right, of course. I made the appointment that afternoon. Dr. Daniel Richards had been my physician for 20 years, a steady presence through Margaret's illness and my own minor health issues over the years. He was in his late 50s with graying temples and the kind of calm demeanor that made you trust him immediately. "Tell me what's been going on, Bradley," he said, settling into his chair across from me in the examination room. I described everything, the dizziness, the fatigue, the memory problems. As I talked, I watched his expression shift from casual interest to concern. "How long has this been happening?" "Maybe 6 weeks, 2 months. It's hard to say exactly when it started." He ran through the standard examination, blood pressure, reflexes, cognitive tests. Then came the battery of medical tests. Blood work to check for everything from vitamin deficiencies to thyroid problems. a CT scan to rule out stroke or tumors, an MRI to look for signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. I spent 3 days going from one test to another, Natalie driving me to each appointment, holding my hand in waiting rooms. And through it all, I felt a cold dread settling in my chest. What if this was it? What if just when I'd gotten my family back, my body was giving up? A week later, I sat in Dr. Richards' office again, waiting for results. And everything came back normal, he said, and I should have felt relieved. But the look on his face told me he was puzzled. Your blood work is clean. The scans show no abnormalities. Cognitively, you're testing fine, no signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. Then what's wrong with me? He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Bradley, you're 68 years old. You've been under significant stress, your daughter coming back into your life, taking on the care of your grandson. Sometimes our bodies respond to emotional strain in physical ways. The symptoms you're describing could be stress-related, or they could simply be part of aging. My recommendation is to take it easy. Reduce your workload. Get more rest. Let's see if that helps. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the only one he had. That evening, I sat in the library staring at the fire and trying to process the doctor's words. Stress, aging, nothing serious. But why did it feel like I was losing pieces of myself? Dad, Natalie's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She stood in the doorway holding a cup of tea. Dr. Richards called to check on you. He said you need to rest more. She crossed the room and set the tea on the table beside me, chamomile my favorite. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, taking the cup. The warmth felt good in my hands. You need to take care of yourself, she said softly, her hand on my shoulder. We need you, Dad. Caleb and I, we need you healthy. I looked up at her at the concern in her eyes and felt a rush of gratitude. Whatever was happening to me, at least, I wasn't facing it alone. I raised the cup to my lips and drank. A month later, I woke to the familiar sound of my bedroom door opening softly. Through the early morning light filtering through the curtains, I watched Natalie enter, carrying a tray with my coffee black 2 sugars, exactly how I'd always taken it. Good morning, Dad, she said, setting the tray on my nightstand with a gentle smile. I made your favorite. This had become our routine. Every morning for the past month, Natalie would bring me coffee before I'd even gotten out of bed. At first, I'd found it touching my daughter taking care of me the way I'd once taken care of her. But lately, I'd begun to notice things. I reached for the cup, and my hand trembled. Not much, just a slight shake that made the coffee slosh against the sides. I'd never had tremors before. I set the cup down quickly, embarrassed, but Natalie had already seen. Are you okay? She asked, concern creasing her forehead. Just a little shaky in the mornings, I said, forcing a smile. Nothing to worry about. But it was something to worry about. The symptoms, Dr. Richards couldn't explain, had become my new normal, the constant underlying fatigue, the mental fog that never quite lifted. And now this. My hands, which had once been steady enough to sign legal documents and shake hands with business partners, now trembled when I reached for a simple cup of coffee. One morning, about a week after the tremors started, I woke earlier than usual. Natalie hadn't come in yet. I lay there staring at the ceiling and realized something. My head felt clear. Not perfectly clear. I was still tired, but clearer than it had been in weeks. My thoughts moved at a normal pace. The fog had lifted slightly. 20 minutes later, Natalie arrived with the coffee. You're up early, she said, surprised. Couldn't sleep. I lied. I took the cup from her, thanked her, and after she left, I set it on the nightstand. I didn't drink it. I told myself I wasn't hungry yet, that I'd have it later. But really, I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't. By mid-morning, I felt more alert than I had in months. My mind was sharper. The tremor in my hands had lessened. It was subtle, but it was there, an undeniable difference. The coffee. The thought came unbidden, and I immediately pushed it away. That was ridiculous. Natalie had been nothing but devoted since she'd come home. She'd given up her life in California to take care of me and Caleb. She'd been patient with my medical issues, driving me to appointments, managing my medications, organizing my schedule. The coffee was her way of showing love. That was all. But the thought wouldn't leave me alone. That afternoon, I called Dr. Richards. "I want to run another test," I told him. "Check for, I don't know, anything unusual." "Bradley, we've run every test available. Everything came back clean." "I know, but," I hesitated. How could I say this without sounding paranoid? "Could you check for substances? Anything that might be causing these symptoms?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You think someone is... Are you suggesting something intentional?" "No," I said quickly. No, nothing like that. I just want to be thorough." He agreed, and I went in for more blood work. 3 days later, he called with the results. "Everything's negative," he said. "No toxins, no unusual substances. Whatever's causing your symptoms, it's not coming from outside sources." I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt guilty for even suspecting. Natalie had sacrificed so much to be here. How could I repay her devotion with suspicion? That evening, I sat in Caleb's room while Natalie prepared dinner downstairs. He was in his wheelchair by the window, and I'd pulled a chair up beside him. "Your mom takes good care of both of us," I said, more to myself than to him. Caleb didn't respond. He couldn't. But I noticed something odd. His eyes, which had been looking out the window, shifted to the doorway. Following his gaze, I caught a glimpse of Natalie in the hallway. Her phone pressed to her ear, her voice too low to hear. When she saw me looking, she smiled and waved, before disappearing down the stairs. I looked back at Caleb. His eyes were still fixed on the empty doorway, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. If I'd known what that morning would bring, I would have paid more attention to the way he watched her when she thought no one was looking. The way his eyes tracked her movements with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone who appeared so disconnected from the world around him. But I didn't know. Not yet. The next morning, when Natalie brought me coffee, I thanked her with a smile and raised the cup to my lips. I drank. A week later, Natalie came to me with news that should have felt routine, but somehow didn't. "Dad, I need to fly to Los Angeles tomorrow," she said over breakfast. "My lawyer needs me to sign some final paperwork for the divorce." "Spencer Caldwell?" I asked, remembering the name from previous conversations. "Yes. He's been handling everything with Scott custody arrangements for Caleb division of assets. There are just a few things that need my signature in person." It made sense. Divorces were complicated, especially ones involving a child, and allegations of harm. Still, something about the timing felt off, though I couldn't put my finger on why. What happened next, however, couldn't be explained away so easily. That afternoon, Carol came to the house as usual for her shift with Caleb. But instead of going upstairs to his room, Natalie met her at the door. I was in my study when I heard their voices, Carol's confused, Natalie's firm but apologetic. When I came out to the hallway, I found Carol standing there with her bag looking stunned. "I'm sorry, Carol," Natalie was saying. "With Dad's medical bills and everything else, we need to cut costs where we can. I can handle Caleb's care myself." "But..." Carol looked at me, then back at Natalie. "I thought Mr. Pierce was covering my salary. I didn't realize finances were..." "It's fine," Natalie said quickly. "We'll call you if anything changes." After Carol left, I stood in the entryway trying to process what had just happened. Cut costs, I'd built a hotel empire worth over $160 million. Carol's salary was barely a line item in my monthly expenses. And more importantly, Natalie had been grateful for Carol's help with Caleb. Why would she suddenly fire her? An hour later, my phone rang. Carol. "Mr. Pierce, I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice tight with worry. "But I needed to tell you something about today felt wrong. Very wrong. I can't explain it, but in my 20 years of nursing, you develop instincts about these things. Please just be careful. Watch after yourself and that sweet boy." "Carol, what are you saying?" "I don't know. I truly don't. But something's not right in that house. I felt it today, and I've been feeling it for weeks." She hung up before I could press her further. I sat in my study for a long time after that call, turning her words over in my mind. What had she sensed? What had I been missing? That evening, I had a meeting at one of my downtown properties, the flagship hotel that had started the whole empire 40 years ago. I was early, so I stopped in the lobby to check on some renovation work. That's when I saw them. Natalie and a man I didn't recognize sitting in the lounge area near the windows. He was about 40, wearing an expensive suit, his dark hair graying at the temples. Professional, polished. They were leaning close together, speaking in low voices, and when Natalie laughed at something, he said she touched his arm in a way that was far too familiar. I watched from across the lobby, partially hidden by a large, potted palm. The man said something else, and Natalie's expression changed, became serious, almost calculating. She glanced around, as if checking to see if anyone was watching, then pulled out her phone and showed him something on the screen. Spencer Caldwell. It had to be. I saw the way she looked at him, not the way a client looks at her attorney, but the way a woman looks at a man she's intimately involved with. There was an ease between them, a chemistry that made my stomach turn. When had she told me Spencer was coming to Portland? She hadn't. She'd said she was flying to LA to meet him. So why was he here in my hotel, meeting with my daughter in secret? I left before they could see me, my mind racing. The pieces were there, scattered and incomplete, but they were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. Carol's firing, the secretive meeting, the way Natalie had been so eager to help with my business affairs, to get access to my financial records. She was planning something that involved everything I'd built over the past 4 decades. But what that night, I barely slept. At 4:30 in the morning, I heard Natalie moving around downstairs, getting ready for her flight. At 5, a car arrived to take her to the airport. She came to my room to say goodbye, kissing my forehead the way she had when she was a little girl. "I'll call you when I land," she promised. "Take care of yourself, Dad, and keep an eye on Caleb for me." "I will," I said. I watched from my window as the car pulled away, brake lights disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness, and I wondered what she was really going to do in Los Angeles. That night, Thursday night, before Natalie left for Los Angeles, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the scene from the hotel lobby. Natalie's hand on Spencer's arm, the calculating look on her face. Carol's warning echoing in my head. Something's not right in that house. At midnight, I gave up trying to sleep. I pulled on my robe and slippers and made my way downstairs, moving quietly, so I wouldn't wake Natalie or Caleb. I wasn't sure where I was going at first. The kitchen, maybe for some water or warm milk. But my feet carried me past the kitchen, through the mudroom, to the door that led to the garage. I stood there for a moment, my hand on the doorknob. What was I looking for? What did I expect to find? I didn't know. But the anxiety that had been building all day, all week, really had reached a point where I needed to do something, anything, to quiet it. I opened the door and flipped on the garage lights. The space was immaculate, as always. Natalie's black Mercedes sat in its usual spot on the left. My own car, a silver Lexus I rarely drove anymore, sat on the right. Tools hung neatly on pegboards. Storage boxes lined the far wall. Everything looked normal. But something made me walk over to the wall where the carbon monoxide detectors were mounted. We had two, one near the door to the house, one near the garage door opener. Basic safety equipment that I'd installed years ago and barely thought about since. I reached up and pressed the test button on the first one. Nothing. I pressed it again. Still nothing. No beep, no flashing light. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I moved to the second detector and pressed its test button. Nothing. I pulled the first detector off the wall and opened the battery compartment. Empty. Completely empty. I checked the second one. Also empty. Both carbon monoxide detectors had been disabled. My hands were shaking as I stood there holding the useless devices. When had this happened? Who had done it? The batteries didn't just fall out on their own. Someone had deliberately removed them from both detectors. But why? I set the detectors on a workbench and looked around the garage again, this time more carefully. My eyes landed on Natalie's Mercedes. Had I heard the engine running earlier? No, that was impossible. The garage had been quiet all evening. I walked over to the car, running my hand along its smooth black surface. As I moved toward the rear, something caught my eye near the exhaust pipe. I crouched down my knees, protesting, and squinted in the dim light. There was a rubber tube, a flexible one maybe 2 inches in diameter, connected to something near the exhaust. But the light was poor, and from my angle I couldn't see where it led or what it was attached to. It looked wrong, out of place, but in the shadows and my exhausted state I couldn't make sense of it. I straightened up, my mind foggy with fatigue and confusion. Maybe it was something Natalie had added for maintenance. Some kind of diagnostic tool. I wasn't a mechanic. I didn't know what modern cars required. I'd ask her about it in the morning, and about the detector batteries. There had to be a reasonable explanation. I took one last look around the garage, but whatever clarity I'd been seeking hadn't come. If anything, I felt more unsettled than before. I turned off the lights and went back inside, locking the door behind me. Back in my bedroom, I climbed into bed and closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept circling back to those empty battery compartments, to that strange rubber tube, to the way Natalie had looked at Spencer Caldwell. Something's not right in that house. Carol's words. True or paranoid, I didn't know anymore. I must have dozed off eventually, because the next thing I knew, gray dawn light was filtering through my curtains. I heard sounds downstairs, Natalie moving around, getting ready for her flight. I thought about going down, about asking her about the garage, about the detectors. But what would I say? Why did you remove the batteries from the CO detectors? It sounded accusatory, suspicious. And what if there was a perfectly innocent explanation? What if I was letting Carol's worry and my own exhaustion turn me paranoid? I stayed in bed, listening to the sounds of Natalie preparing to leave. At 4:30, I heard her footsteps on the stairs. At 5, I heard a car door close and engine start, tires on gravel. By the time I got up and looked out the window, she was gone. And I never got to ask her about what I'd found in the garage. Are you still here? Let me know in the comments, what do you think Natalie is planning with that rubber tube? Your theories matter to me. One thing to mention: the story ahead includes fictionalized details designed to heighten the drama and explore complex family dynamics. If you'd rather not continue, now's the time to pause. For everyone staying, the next morning will change everything. I woke at 7 to pale morning light and the echo of a sleepless night. My head felt heavy. My thoughts still tangled in what I'd found in the garage. Those empty battery compartments, that strange rubber tube I couldn't make sense of in the dark. I should have felt worse after barely sleeping. But there was a clarity to my exhaustion, a sharpness that cut through the fog that had been clouding my mind for weeks. Maybe it was the coffee, or rather, the lack of it. Natalie wasn't here to bring me my morning cup. I was still in bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to decide whether to get up when my phone rang. Natalie's number. Dad. Did I wake you? No, I'm up. I sat up slowly, rubbing my face. You made it to Los Angeles, okay? Just got to the hotel. Listen, Dad, I need to ask you something. Her voice had that worried edge I'd learned to recognize. I have this feeling that something's wrong with my car. Could you check it for me? I frowned. What kind of something? I don't know exactly. It doesn't feel right. Maybe you could start the engine. See if it runs okay. I thought about the rubber tube I'd seen last night, the one I'd meant to ask her about. This could be related, or it could be nothing. Sure, I said. I can do that. Thank you, Dad. I really appreciate it. Just let it run for a minute and make sure everything sounds normal. She hung up before I could mention what I'd found in the garage. I got dressed slowly, my mind turning over the request. It was reasonable enough. She'd been about to leave on a trip when she left yesterday. Maybe she'd noticed something wrong with the car, but forgot to mention it in the rush. Still, something about it felt off. I made my way downstairs and through the mudroom to the garage. The morning light filtered weakly through the high windows, and I could see my breath in the cold air. I walked over to Natalie's Mercedes, running my hand along its hood. The keys were in the small lockbox she kept in the garage. I found them, unlocked the car, and slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled like her perfume. For a moment, I just sat there, my hands on the steering wheel, remembering all the times I'd taught her to drive, how proud I'd been when she passed her test. I inserted the key and turned it. The engine purred to life immediately. Smooth, quiet, normal. I let it idle, listening for any unusual sounds, knocking, rattling, anything that would explain why she'd felt something was wrong. Nothing. The car sounded fine. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, waiting, listening. That's when I noticed the smell wasn't just perfume anymore. Something else. Something faint and wrong. My chest felt tight. I reached for the key to turn off the engine, but my hand was shaking. My vision blurred at the edges. The garage seemed to tilt. And then I remembered. The carbon monoxide detectors, both of them, empty battery compartments, the rubber tube by the exhaust. This wasn't about checking the car. I yanked at the door handle, stumbling out of the car, but my legs wouldn't hold me. I fell to my knees on the concrete floor, gasping for air that didn't seem to help. The garage walls swam around me. The door. I had to get to the door. I crawled toward the garage door, my vision darkening. I reached for the wall where I knew the button was the one that would open the door and let in fresh air. I pressed it. Nothing happened. I pressed it again and again. The door didn't move. I looked up at the emergency release, the red handle that hung from the garage door mechanism. If the automatic opener failed, you could pull that handle and open the door manually. But as my eyes focused, I saw that the rope had been cut. Not frayed, not broken. Cut clean through, leaving just a short stub dangling useless above my head. Someone had made sure I couldn't get out. The last thing I remember thinking before the darkness pulled me under was her name. Natalie. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the driveway outside the garage, and someone was kneeling beside me. I blinked, trying to focus, my head pounding, my lungs burning. Grandpa. A voice, young, scared. Caleb. But Caleb couldn't move. Caleb couldn't speak clearly. I turned my head and saw him. Really saw him. My 12-year-old grandson was crouched beside me, his hands on my shoulders, his face tight with worry. He wasn't in his wheelchair. He wasn't slumped at an awkward angle. He was kneeling on the ground, supporting my weight, perfectly capable of movement. Grandpa, he said again, and his voice was clear and strong. Can you hear me? I stared at him, unable to process what I was seeing. I couldn't finish the sentence. I need to tell you the truth. Caleb said, his dark eyes meeting mine. I'm not paralyzed. I never was. I've been pretending for 9 months to protect you from her. The world tilted again, but this time it had nothing to do with carbon monoxide. What? I whispered. Mom tried to kill you just now, he said. And this wasn't the first time she tried. We need to call the police. But first I need you to understand everything. We sat in the living room as morning light filtered through the windows. My hands still trembled. The smell of exhaust clung to my clothes, and every breath reminded me how close I'd come to never taking another. Caleb sat across from me, no longer in his wheelchair. His legs worked fine. His neck wasn't crooked. He looked like any 12-year-old boy except for the tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry, Grandpa, he whispered. I wanted to speak, but my throat was too tight. I just waited. Mom told me I had to pretend. Caleb said, his voice breaking. She said if I didn't help her, she'd leave me. That she couldn't do this alone. That you didn't care about us, and we had to take care of ourselves. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I believed her at first. I thought maybe she was right. Maybe we really needed to do this. Do what? I managed to ask. Caleb looked down at his hands. She didn't tell me everything. Not at first. She just said I had to pretend to be paralyzed so you'd feel sorry for us. So you'd let us stay. My chest tightened. When did you find out? October, he said quietly. I started hearing things, late at night when she thought I was asleep. She'd talk on the phone to Spencer, about money, about a $25 million life insurance policy. The number hit me like a physical blow. I didn't understand at first, Caleb continued. But then I heard them talking about making it look like an accident, about carbon monoxide, about you. He pulled something from his pocket, an old smartphone. The screen cracked. I bought this with my allowance money, he said. I started recording everything, every phone call I could hear, every conversation when they thought I wasn't listening. I took pictures of text messages when Mom left her phone on the counter. He handed me the phone. Everything's here, Grandpa. All the proof we need. I stared at the device in my hand. The screen showed a list of audio files, photos, text message screenshots. Months of evidence. She was going to kill you this morning, Caleb said, his voice barely above a whisper. That's why she called about the car. She wanted you in the garage with the engine running. She'd already set everything up. The rubber tube, I said. Caleb nodded. She connected it from the exhaust pipe to the cabin air intake. When you started the engine, carbon monoxide would pump directly into the car. And she'd disabled the CO detectors, so nothing would warn you. I felt sick. The garage door was locked from the outside. Caleb continued. She did that before she left. You weren't supposed to be able to get out. How did you know? I asked. How did you know it was happening? I heard the engine, he said. It had been running too long, and I knew this was the day. So I ran down. I used the emergency release to open the garage door. I pulled you out. Tears were rolling down his cheeks again. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared. I thought maybe Mom would change her mind. Maybe she wouldn't really go through with it. But she did. And I couldn't let her kill you. His voice broke completely. Even if it means I lose her forever. I set the phone down and pulled Caleb into my arms. He sobbed against my chest. This boy who'd been forced to choose between his mother and his grandfather, who'd been manipulated and used, who'd still found the courage to do the right thing. You did the right thing, I whispered. You saved my life. We sat like that for several minutes. Outside, Portland's morning traffic hummed in the distance. Inside, everything had changed. Finally, I pulled back and looked at Caleb. Then I looked at the phone in my hand, at the evidence of my daughter's betrayal, at proof of conspiracy to commit murder. I thought about Natalie in Los Angeles right now, probably thinking her plan had worked. Probably already planning how she'd react when she got the news of my accident. And I looked at Caleb, at this brave boy who'd been caught in the middle of something terrible. "We need to call the police," I said. "Right now. My daughter tried to kill me this morning." The words felt unreal coming out of my mouth, but Detective Michelle Brennan's voice on the other end of the line stayed calm and professional. "Mr. Pierce, I'm going to need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't touch anything in the garage. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I hung up and immediately dialed another number. Ronald Cooper had managed my hotel properties for 20 years. If anyone would come without questions, it was him. "Ronald, I need you to bring me some documents. The life insurance policy Natalie had me sign 6 months ago. Everything related to it. Can you be here in 30 minutes? "Of course, Mr. Pierce. Is everything all right?" "No," I said, "but it will be." At 9:15, Detective Brennan arrived. She was 45 with sharp eyes that missed nothing and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a dark blazer and carried a leather portfolio. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm. "Show me everything," she said. We sat in the living room, Caleb the detective and me. Morning light streamed through the windows, making the whole scene feel surreal. How could we be discussing murder on such a beautiful day? I started at the beginning. 13 years of distance. Natalie's return 6 months ago with Caleb in a wheelchair. My symptoms starting in January. This morning's trap in the garage. Brennan took notes without interrupting. Her expression never changed. When I finished, she turned to Caleb. "You have evidence?" Caleb handed her the phone. His hands shook slightly. Brennan scrolled through the text messages first. I watched her face as she read. Her jaw tightened. "25 million is worth the wait," she read aloud. "That's from Natalie to Spencer Caldwell." "Yes," Caleb said quietly. "From 2 months ago." Brennan clicked on the first audio file. Natalie's voice filled the room and I felt sick all over again. "We'll make it look like an accident. CO poisoning is perfect. Everyone will think it was the old house, faulty detectors, tragic but natural." Spencer's voice responded, "And you're sure the insurance will pay out?" "Positive. 25 million. We'll finally be free." The recording ended. Brennan's expression had hardened. "How many of these are there?" she asked. 17, Caleb said. "She from October until last week." Brennan continued through the evidence. Spencer Caldwell's search history showed queries for carbon monoxide poisoning symptoms. How long does CO take to kill and undetectable poisons? Then came the photos. Caleb had taken them through his bedroom window shots of Natalie in the garage late at night, installing the rubber tube that connected the exhaust to the cabin air intake. The timestamps showed she'd done it 3 days ago. "There's more," Caleb said. He pulled up a series of screenshots. "Mom bought lorazepam online using a fake name. That's what she was putting in Grandpa's coffee." Brennan zoomed in on one of the screenshots. Jennifer Walsh had purchased 60 tablets of lorazepam from an online pharmacy shipped to a P.O. box in Portland. "The symptoms started in January, I said. "Dizziness, fatigue, memory problems. My doctor ran tests, but everything came back normal." "Because he wasn't testing for benzodiazepines," Brennan said. "She was drugging you slowly, making you think you were losing your mind." The pieces were falling into place, but each revelation made me feel sicker. Brennan stood. "I need to see the garage." We went down together. The smell of exhaust still lingered. Brennan examined the CO detectors mounted on the walls, both of them hung open, batteries removed. She crouched beside the Mercedes, studying the rubber tube still attached to the exhaust pipe. She took photos with her phone, documenting everything. "This is attempted murder," she said flatly. "Premeditated, planned over months. The drugging, the fake disability story, the insurance policy. She built an entire alibi." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we make sure she can't run." We returned to the living room just as Ronald Cooper arrived. He carried a leather briefcase and looked worried. "Mr. Pierce." "Thank you for coming, Ronald." I took the briefcase. "This is Detective Brennan. She needs to see the insurance documents." Ronald handed everything over without questions. I'd tell him the full story later. Brennan spread the papers across the coffee table. The life insurance policy was dated 6 months ago, right when Natalie had returned. $25 million. Natalie was listed as the sole beneficiary. "She had you sign this?" Brennan asked. "She said it was just updating my estate planning. I didn't think anything of it." Brennan made more notes. "She's been planning this since the day she came back." We spent the next hour going through every detail. Brennan wanted timelines, dates, witnesses. I told her about Carol Anderson, the nurse Natalie had fired last week. "Can you call her?" Brennan asked. "We'll need her testimony about Natalie's behavior." I dialed Carol's number. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Pierce, is everything okay? I've been worried." "Carol, I need you to do something for me. Something important." I explained what had happened. There was a long silence. "I knew something was wrong," Carol finally said. "The way she was always hovering around you, watching everything you ate and drank, and firing me right before this trip to LA, it felt calculated." "Will you testify to that?" "Absolutely. Whatever you need." After I hung up, Brennan leaned back in her chair. "Here's what's going to happen. When Natalie calls from Los Angeles, you're going to act like nothing is wrong. Tell her you're fine, everything's normal. Don't let her know we're on to her." "You want her to come back?" Caleb asked. "I want her to think she got away with it," Brennan said. "When she returns to Portland, we'll arrest her. If we move too soon, her lawyer will argue she was just traveling. But if she comes back expecting to find you dead or dying, that's when we have her." My stomach turned. "You want me to pretend my daughter didn't just try to murder me?" "I want you to help me put her in prison for the rest of her life," Brennan said. Her voice was hard, but not unkind. Can you do that?" I looked at Caleb, this brave boy who'd been manipulated and used, who'd saved my life this morning. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." Brennan stood and collected her notes. "I'll have officers watching the house. Plain clothes, unmarked cars. The moment Natalie returns to Portland, we move. Until then, business as usual." She paused at the door. "Mr. Pierce, your daughter is dangerous. Don't underestimate her. If she suspects anything, she'll run." "I understand." After Brennan left, Caleb and I sat in silence. The house felt different now, like a stage set waiting for the final act. My phone buzzed. A text from Natalie: "Meetings going well. Miss you both. Home tomorrow." I stared at the message, so casual, so loving. As if she hadn't left me to die in a garage full of carbon monoxide just hours ago. I typed back, glad to hear it. "See you soon." Caleb watched me. "What do we do now?" "Now," I said, "we wait for your mother to come home." At 3 o'clock, my phone rang. I stared at the screen. Natalie glowed in white letters against the black background. Caleb sat across from me in his wheelchair, back in the prison he'd escaped from this morning. We'd been preparing for this call all day, but now that it was here, my hands shook. I took a deep breath and answered. Hi, sweetheart. Dad. Her voice was bright, warm, concerned. How are you feeling? I've been thinking about you all day. I forced a cough, made my voice thin and tired. I'm okay, just a little worn out. You know how it is. Have you been resting? She asked. I worry about you pushing yourself too hard. Every word felt like walking through a minefield. I had to sound weak but not alarming, tired but not dying yet. I've been resting, I said. Caleb's been keeping me company. That's good. Is he there? Can I talk to him? I handed Caleb the phone. He'd been practicing all morning, but I saw the fear in his eyes as he raised it to his ear. Hi, Mom. He said, his voice small and fragile. I miss you. I miss you too, baby. Are you being good for Grandpa? Yes, Mom. And you're comfortable, you have everything you need. Yes, I wish you were here. The lie came so easily from him. I wondered how many times he'd had to lie for her before. Natalie's voice softened. I'll be home soon, I promise. Let me talk to your grandpa again, okay? Caleb handed the phone back. His hands were shaking. Dad. Natalie's tone shifted slightly. Has anything unusual happened? Everything's been normal. This was it. The real test. Unusual? No, nothing unusual. Why do you ask? Oh, no reason. I just want to make sure you're both okay while I'm away. My grip tightened on the phone. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her I knew everything about Spencer, about the $25 million, about the carbon monoxide trap she'd left me in this morning. But instead, I made my voice gentle. Oh, we're fine, honey. Just missing you. I miss you too, Dad. I closed my eyes. Imagined her in some Los Angeles hotel room, probably lying on a king-sized bed, looking out at the city lights. She thought she'd won. She thought I was slowly dying, confused and weak, maybe already planning my funeral in her head. She thought by the time she came back, I'd begun another tragic accident, an old man in an old house with faulty carbon monoxide detectors. The anger burned in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. How are your meetings going? I asked. Oh, they're fine. The divorce paperwork is almost done. She paused. Actually, Dad, I'm thinking of coming home early. Tonight, maybe. My heart jumped. Tonight, don't rush on our account. Caleb and I are managing just fine. Please don't rush, I thought. Please give the police time to prepare. Are you sure I feel bad leaving you alone when you're not feeling well? I'm sure. Take care of your business. We'll be here when you get back. Another pause. Longer this time. Dad, you'd tell me if something was wrong, wouldn't you? The question hung in the air. I heard the edge in her voice, suspicion maybe, or just paranoia. She was testing me one more time. Of course I would, I said. But there's nothing wrong. Just take your time. Okay? Her voice relaxed. I love you, Dad. The words were like knives. I love you too, sweetheart. The line went dead. I set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. My whole body was shaking. Caleb was staring at me, his face pale. Did I do okay? He whispered. You did perfect. We sat in silence. I hadn't realized how exhausting it would be, pretending to be weak, pretending to trust her, pretending everything was normal when my daughter had tried to murder me just hours ago. The performance had drained me more than the actual poisoning. Caleb climbed out of the wheelchair and sat beside me on the couch. We didn't speak. What was there to say? My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Brennan's subject has booked United Flight 1847. Departing LAX at 8 o'clock p.m., arriving PDX at 10:15 p.m., officers in position. Proceed as planned. I checked the time. 3:30 p.m. In less than 7 hours, Natalie would be back in Portland. In less than 7 hours, the police would arrest my daughter for attempted murder. I showed Caleb the message. He read it without expression. "What happens when she comes home?" he asked. "The police will be waiting. They'll arrest her at the airport or here at the house. Detective Brennan will decide. Will she go to prison?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Good." But his voice broke on the word, and I realized he was crying. This brave boy who'd saved my life, who'd gathered evidence for months, who'd just performed flawlessly on that phone call. He was still 12 years old, and he'd just helped send his mother to prison. I pulled him close. "I'm sorry you had to do this." "It's not your fault," he said. "It's hers." He was right. But it didn't make it any easier. We sat together as the afternoon light faded. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Every minute brought us closer to the moment when everything would change. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Brennan. "Stay alert. If she calls again, same performance. Don't let your guard down." I typed back, "Understood." Caleb looked up at me. "What do we do now?" I glanced at the clock. 4 p.m., 6 hours until Natalie's flight, 8 hours until she'd be back in Portland. Now, I said we wait. But this time we weren't waiting helplessly. This time we had the police on our side. This time we had evidence. This time Natalie was walking into a trap of her own making. I thought about her text from this morning. "Meeting's going well. Miss you both. Home tomorrow." Tomorrow had become tonight. The flight landed at 10 o'clock Friday night. I stood at the living room window watching the driveway. Caleb sat in his wheelchair beside me, both of us back in our roles. At 10:30, headlights swept across the front of the house. Natalie came through the door with her suitcase and a bright smile. "Dad!" She dropped her bag and hurried to embrace me. "You look exhausted. Have you been resting?" I let my body sag against her, made my breathing shallow. "I'm okay, just tired." Her hand pressed against my back, and I wondered if she was checking for a pulse, estimating how much longer I had. "We need to get you to Dr. Richards," she said. "I'll make an appointment for Monday morning." "That's not necessary." "I insist." Her voice was firm. "You don't look well at all, Dad." "Because you've been poisoning me," I thought, but I just nodded weakly. That weekend was the longest 2 days of my life. Saturday morning, Natalie made coffee. I watched her measure the grounds, add the water, pour the dark liquid into my favorite mug. She brought it to me with a concerned smile. "Drink up, Dad. You need your strength." I raised the cup to my lips, pretended to sip, and set it down. When she left the room, I poured it into the potted plant by the window. Every cup she made, I disposed of the same way. By Sunday, that plant was probably dying too. Through it all, I knew the police were watching. Detective Brennan had set up surveillance in Susan Crawford's house across the street. Susan was 72 and had lived in the neighborhood for 40 years. When Brennan explained the situation, she'd offered her home immediately. Brennan texted me updates throughout the weekend. Officers in position. Subject hasn't left the property. Stay alert. But on Saturday night, Natalie did leave. At 11 o'clock, she told me she was going for a drive to clear her head. I watched from my bedroom window as she got into her Mercedes. 20 minutes later, another car pulled up 2 blocks away, a black BMW Spencer Caldwell. Caleb had planted a listening device in Natalie's car 3 days ago, when we'd first started building the case. Sunday morning, he brought me his phone with the recording queued up. I pressed play. Spencer's voice came through first. Why isn't he dead yet? The lorazepam isn't working fast enough, Natalie replied. He's more resistant than I thought. We can't wait much longer. Every day increases the risk. I know. A pause. Monday, I'll finish it. How? I made an appointment with Dr. Richards for 9 in the morning. I'll drive him there. On the way back, I'll give him a heavy dose enough to knock him out. Then I'll stage a car accident. Single vehicle collision, elderly driver with medical issues. It'll look completely natural. My hands shook as I held the phone. Even knowing what she was capable of hearing her plan, my death so casually made my stomach turn. Spencer's voice. And you're sure this will work? It has to. I've already waited too long. Another pause. After Monday, it's done. 25 million, Spencer. We just have to be patient for one more day. The recording ended. Caleb watched my face. What do we do? I looked at the timestamp, 11:47 p.m. Saturday. Less than 36 hours until Monday morning. We tell Detective Brennan, I said, and we set a trap. Sunday passed in painful slow motion. I continued my performance, weak, confused, declining. Natalie hovered constantly watching me with those calculating eyes. She made more coffee. I poured it away. She suggested I rest. I pretended to sleep while listening to her move through the house. That evening, she cooked dinner chicken soup, she said good for my strength. I ate a few spoonfuls and claimed I was too tired for more. She looked disappointed. You need to eat, Dad. How are you going to get better if you don't eat? I'm not supposed to get better, I thought. I'm supposed to die. After she went to bed, I sent Detective Brennan a detailed message, Dr. Richards' office, Monday, 9:00 a.m. She plans to drug me heavily on the drive home and stage a car accident. We can catch her in the act. Brennan's response came within minutes, understood. Officers will follow at a distance. We'll intervene before she can hurt you. Do not get in that car with her alone. We'll have someone pose as Dr. Richards' nurse. You'll be protected. I read the message 3 times. Tomorrow this would finally be over. Tomorrow Natalie would be arrested. Tomorrow Caleb and I could stop pretending. I walked to Caleb's room. He was still awake, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I said quietly. He nodded. I'm scared. Me too. What if something goes wrong? I sat on the edge of his bed. Detective Brennan knows what she's doing. We'll be safe. Will Mom go to prison? Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. Good, he finally whispered, but his eyes filled with tears. I stayed with him until he fell asleep, then returned to my room. Through the wall, I could hear Natalie moving around, probably checking that I was still breathing, still alive enough to collect the insurance money tomorrow. I lay in bed and watched the clock. 11:47 p.m. In less than 10 hours, I'd be sitting in Dr. Richards' office. In less than 11 hours, Natalie would try to kill me one final time. And the police would be waiting. I picked up my phone and texted Brennan one more message, 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. Dr. Richards' office. She'll be there. The response was immediate. We'll be ready. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. One more night. One more performance. One more day of pretending my daughter loved me instead of wanting me dead. If you've made it this far, leave a comment telling me, do you think Natalie will get away with it? Or will justice catch up to her? I need to know what you're thinking right now. Quick note. This story weaves fictional details throughout to explore the emotional truth of betrayal and family. Some specifics are crafted for narrative power. If you'd prefer not to continue, you can exit here. For everyone else, Monday morning is about to arrive. and nothing will ever be the same. Monday morning, Natalie drove me to Dr. Richards's office. I sat in the passenger seat, watching her hands on the steering wheel, the same hands that had poisoned my coffee for 4 months, disabled carbon monoxide detectors, installed a rubber tube to kill me. She chatted pleasantly about the weather, about Caleb's physical therapy schedule, about maybe taking a family vacation when I felt better. I said nothing. In 15 minutes, this would all be over. The medical building stood in downtown Portland, glass and steel reflecting the gray morning sky. Natalie found a parking spot and came around to help me out. I let her take my arm as we walked across the lot. "You're doing great, Dad," she murmured. "Dr. Richards will figure out what's wrong." She already knows what's wrong, I thought. She's the cause. The waiting room was empty except for the receptionist, one of Detective Brennan's officers most likely. She smiled and gestured toward the chairs. We sat together, Natalie's hand resting on mine. "I'm so glad we're getting you checked out," she said. "I've been so worried." I looked at her face. She seemed genuinely concerned, genuinely loving. If I didn't know better, I'd believe her completely. That was the most terrifying part, how easily she lied, how naturally the performance came. "Mr. Pierce." Dr. Richards appeared in the doorway. "Please come in. Both of you." We followed him into the examination room, the same room I'd been in dozens of times, with the same posters on the walls, the same examination table covered in crinkly paper. Natalie helped me onto the table, her hand on my shoulder. The devoted daughter. The perfect performance. "Doctor." Richards pulled up his stool, but before he could speak, Natalie launched into her prepared speech. "Doctor, I'm really worried about my father. He's been so weak lately, forgetting things, having dizzy spells. This morning, he could barely—" The door opened. Detective Brennan stepped in, followed by 3 uniformed police officers. Natalie's voice died mid-sentence. The color drained from her face. I stood up from the examination table. No trembling, no weakness, no confusion. I looked directly at my daughter. "I know everything, Natalie," I said quietly. "The lorazepam you've been putting in my coffee for 4 months. The carbon monoxide trap in the garage. Your plan with Spencer Caldwell to make it look like an accident and collect $25 million. Dad!" Her voice was barely a whisper. Detective Brennan stepped forward. "Natalie Pierce, you are under arrest for attempted murder in the first-degree conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud." She read the Miranda rights while 2 officers moved to either side of Natalie. My daughter stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The handcuffs clicked shut around Natalie's wrists. That's when she broke. "No." She lunged toward me, but the officers held her back. "Dad, please, you don't understand. I never meant I didn't." Tears streamed down her face. "I love you, Dad. I love you. Please don't do this." I watched her sob, watched her performance shift from devoted daughter to desperate criminal, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a vast, empty coldness. "Ms. Pierce, you need to come with us now," one of the officers said. "Dad!" She was screaming now, fighting against them as they guided her toward the door. "Please, you're my father. How can you do this to me?" "Because you tried to murder me, I thought. Because you poisoned my coffee and trapped me in a garage and planned my death as an accident. Because you used your own son as a pawn. Because you're my daughter and you wanted me dead." But I said nothing. I just watched. Detective Brennan's phone rang. She answered, listened briefly, then turned to me. Spencer Caldwell has been arrested at his law office, she said. Officers caught him trying to delete files from his computer emails between him and your daughter discussing the insurance policy, the timeline, everything. We have him. I nodded. Good. Both of them caught. Natalie was at the door now, still crying, still calling my name. She looked back one final time, her face red and swollen with tears, mascara running down her cheeks. I'm your daughter, she whispered. Doesn't that mean anything to you? For a moment, just a moment, I saw the little girl she'd been 30 years ago. The child who'd sat on my lap and listened to bedtime stories, who'd laughed at my jokes, who'd hugged me goodnight every evening. Then I remembered Caleb's face when he'd pulled me from that garage. I remembered the recordings of her planning my death. I remembered 13 years of manipulation and lies. Yes, I said quietly. It means everything. That's why this hurts so much. The officers led her away. Her cries echoed down the hallway, growing fainter and fainter until finally silence. A door closed somewhere in the distance, and she was gone. I stood in that examination room with Detective Brennan and Dr. Richards and felt an infinite emptiness open up inside me. No anger, no relief, just a profound, aching sadness that would probably never go away. She was still my daughter, and I'd just sent her to prison. Detective Brennan touched my shoulder gently. Mr. Pierce, are you all right? No, I said honestly, but I will be. She nodded. Spencer Caldwell is in custody. We have all the evidence, the recordings, the financial documents, the forensic evidence. The district attorney says this is one of the strongest cases she's ever seen. They'll both face maximum sentences. How long? For attempted murder with premeditation, conspiracy, and fraud, Natalie will likely receive 25 years to life. Spencer probably 15 years minimum. 25 years. Natalie was 26 now. She wouldn't see freedom again until she was past 50. Half her life spent in prison for trying to murder her own father. Thank you, Detective, I said quietly. Dr. Richards stepped forward. Dr. Bradley, do you need anything? Water? A moment to sit down. I shook my head. I need to go home. I need to see Caleb. Because Caleb was waiting. Caleb who'd saved my life. Caleb who'd lost his mother today, even though she'd been lost to him long before. Caleb who was my real family now. I'll drive you, Detective Brennan offered. We walked out of the medical building into Portland's gray morning. The rain had started again, that soft, persistent drizzle that made everything smell clean and new. As we drove away, I looked back once at the building where my daughter had been arrested, where the trap had closed, where justice had been served. It was over. The handcuffs had clicked shut. The Miranda rights had been read. My daughter had been led away in chains, crying my name, begging for mercy she didn't deserve. I'd done what needed to be done. I'd protected Caleb. I'd stopped Natalie before she could try again. I'd chosen justice over blood, truth over family loyalty. But God, it hurt. It hurt more than the poison she'd fed me, more than the carbon monoxide that had nearly killed me, more than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. Because despite everything, despite the betrayal and the conspiracy and the attempted murder, she was still my daughter. The little girl I'd raised. The child I'd loved with everything I had. And I just watched her get taken away in handcuffs. Detective Brennan drove in silence, understanding that I needed quiet. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm against the rain. Portland passed by outside gray buildings, gray sky, gray streets. Everything felt gray now. When we pulled up to my house, Caleb was waiting at the window. He saw me get out of the car and ran to the door, pulling it open before I could reach for my keys. "Grandpa," His voice was small, scared. Is it over? I pulled him into my arms and held him tight. Yes, I whispered. It's over. She's been arrested. You're safe now. We're both safe. He started crying deep, shuddering sobs that shook his whole body. I held him and let him cry, stroking his hair, murmuring reassurances. I'm sorry, he kept saying. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for, I told him. You saved my life. You did the right thing. You were so brave. We stood like that for a long time in the doorway of our home, while Detective Brennan waited respectfully by her car, and Portland's rain fell softly around us. Eventually, Caleb pulled back and wiped his eyes. What happens now? Now, I said, we figure out how to move forward, together. He nodded, then looked past me to where Detective Brennan was getting back in her car. Is she really gone, my mom? Yes, I said gently. She'll be in prison for a very long time. Good, he whispered. Then his face crumpled again. Is it bad that I said that I think it's good? I pulled him close again. No, sweetheart. It's not bad. She tried to hurt us. She tried to kill me. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to feel however you feel. I loved her, he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. I know. I loved her too. How do you stop? That was the question, wasn't it? How did you stop loving someone who'd betrayed you so completely? I don't think you do, I said slowly. I think you just learn to live with it. The love and the hurt both at the same time. We went inside together, leaving the gray morning behind. Tomorrow there would be more to deal with, prosecutors to meet with, testimony to prepare, a trial to endure. But today we were safe. Today we were together. Today we were alive, and somehow that would have to be enough. The week after Natalie's arrest, Detective Brennan called me every day with updates. Each conversation revealed another layer of my daughter's betrayal, until I wondered if I'd ever truly known her at all. We've been digging deeper, Mr. Pierce, Brennan said on Tuesday morning, and what we've found, it's worse than we thought. I sat in my study with Caleb beside me, both of us bracing for whatever came next. The forensics team had examined the rubber tube in the garage. Natalie's fingerprints were all over it, clear, undeniable evidence that she'd personally installed the mechanism designed to kill me. The tube had been carefully connected from the exhaust pipe to the cabin air intake system, ensuring that when the engine ran, carbon monoxide would pump directly into the car. She knew exactly what she was doing, Brennan said. This wasn't improvised. She researched it, planned it, executed it. But the forensic evidence was just the beginning. On Wednesday, the toxicology results came back. They'd analyzed samples of my hair, which grows slowly and retains a chemical record of everything in the bloodstream. The lorazepam traces went back 4 months. 4 months of systematic poisoning, starting almost immediately after Natalie returned home. Every morning coffee, I said quietly. For 4 months. Yes, Brennan confirmed. The dosage was calculated to cause cognitive symptoms, dizziness, confusion, memory problems, without being immediately fatal. She wanted you to seem like you were declining naturally. I thought about all those mornings, Natalie bringing me coffee with a smile. Drink up, Dad. You need your strength. Every cup had been poisoned. Every gesture of care had been an attempt to kill me slowly. Caleb's hand found mine. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. On Thursday, Brennan arrived at the house with a thick folder of financial records. We found the motive, she said, spreading papers across my desk. Natalie owed $290,000 to online gambling sites. The statements showed a pattern going back 2 years, small bets at first, then increasingly desperate attempts to win back losses. She'd maxed out credit cards, taken payday loans with interest rates above 40% borrowed from loan sharks. She was drowning, Brennan said, and the $25 million insurance policy must have looked like her only way out. I stared at the numbers. Nearly $300,000 in debt. My daughter had been in crisis for years, and I'd known nothing about it. If she'd just asked me for help. But she hadn't asked. She decided to kill me instead. There's more, Brennan said. Spencer Caldwell has been cooperating with us in exchange for a reduced sentence. Spencer had confessed everything. He described how Natalie had approached him 8 months ago with the plan. She'd seduced him, or maybe he'd been willing from the start. He'd helped her set up the insurance policy, taught her about carbon monoxide poisoning, researched benzodiazepines. In exchange, Natalie had promised him $5 million once she collected the payout. He gave us detailed testimony, Brennan explained. He said Natalie was obsessed with every detail. She mapped out the timeline, calculated the doses, planned your decline month by month. According to Spencer, the plan was perfect. After the carbon monoxide killed me, Natalie would return from Los Angeles and discover my body in the garage. She'd call 911 in hysterics, play the devastated daughter. The carbon monoxide detectors would be blamed for malfunctioning. Tragic, but these things happen in old houses. The insurance company would investigate, find nothing suspicious, and pay out. Spencer said she even practiced her reaction, Brennan added quietly. Rehearsed what she'd say to the 911 operator, how she'd sound when the paramedics arrived. I felt sick. On Friday, Ronald Cooper came to the house. My loyal hotel manager looked exhausted and heartbroken. Mr. Pierce, I found something you need to see. He opened his laptop and showed me a series of emails. 2 weeks before the murder attempt, Natalie had contacted representatives from 3 major hotel chains. She'd inquired about selling the Pierce Hotel Group, my life's work, 40 years of building an empire. The emails were professional, businesslike. She'd provided financial statements, property valuations, revenue projections. She was already planning to liquidate everything, Ronald said. The moment you were gone, she was going to sell. I scrolled through the messages. One buyer had responded with a preliminary offer, $180 million for the entire chain. Natalie had written back, that sounds acceptable. I'll be in touch soon to finalize details. She'd been so confident, so certain she would succeed. Detective Brennan returned that evening with a complete timeline reconstruction. She laid it out on my dining room table, a visual representation of Natalie's conspiracy. June. You sign the life insurance policy. She tells you it's routine estate planning. July through October, she begins poisoning you with lorazepam. Small doses in your morning coffee. You start experiencing symptoms, dizziness, memory problems, but your regular medical tests show nothing wrong. November. She installs the carbon monoxide trap in the garage. She practices tests. It makes sure it will work. December. She fires Carol Anderson, eliminating a potential witness who might notice something suspicious. January. She recruits Spencer Caldwell fully into the plan. They become lovers, co-conspirators. February, the murder attempt. She calls you from Los Angeles about the car problem, expecting you to start the engine and die from carbon monoxide poisoning, while she has a perfect alibi 3 states away. Brennan looked at me. Every single step was calculated. Every kindness she showed you was part of the plan. She was never going to stop until you were dead. I sat in silence, processing the full scope of my daughter's betrayal. Every morning coffee, every concerned question about my health, every "I love you, Dad." All of it had been theater performance manipulation toward a single goal, my death. Caleb sat beside me, quiet and steady. He'd known. For months he'd carried the burden of knowing his mother was a murderer, and he'd still found the courage to save me. "What happens now?" I finally asked. "The district attorney is building the case," Brennan said. With Spencer's testimony, the forensic evidence, the financial records, and Caleb's recordings, this is one of the strongest attempted murder cases I've ever seen. She closed the folder. "Mr. Pierce, this was a cruel, meticulous plan. Your daughter spent months trying to kill you in a way that would look natural. She manipulated everyone around her, you, Caleb, Carol, Anderson, even Spencer eventually. She showed no remorse, no hesitation." Brennan's voice was hard. "She'll face the maximum sentence." "How long?" I asked. 25 years to life for attempted murder. Additional years for conspiracy, fraud, and endangerment of a minor, making Caleb part of her scheme. She won't see freedom again." I should have felt something. Relief, maybe. Or vindication. Instead, I just felt empty. Natalie was 26 years old. 25 years to life meant she'd be in her 50s before parole was even possible. My daughter, the little girl who used to climb into my lap and beg for bedtime stories, would spend the rest of her youth in prison. Because she'd tried to murder me. "Thank you, Detective," I said quietly. After Brennan left, Caleb and I sat in the darkening house. Neither of us turned on the lights. Outside, Portland's winter rain began to fall, the same steady drizzle that had been falling the night Natalie first called me 6 months ago. "Grandpa," Caleb's voice was small, "Are you okay?" I looked at this brave boy who'd saved my life, who'd lost his mother to prison because he'd chosen to do the right thing. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but we'll figure it out together." He leaned against me, and we sat in the darkness listening to the rain. In April, the trial began at Multnomah County Courthouse. I sat in the front row of the gallery, Caleb beside me, and watched my daughter enter in handcuffs. Natalie looked smaller than I remembered, her orange jumpsuit hanging loose on her frame, her face pale without makeup. She glanced back at me once, her eyes pleading, before the bailiff guided her to the defense table. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the coffee, the carbon monoxide, the 4 months of systematic poisoning, and the sympathy vanished. The prosecutor called me as the first witness. Walking to the stand felt surreal, raising my right hand, swearing to tell the truth, sitting in that wooden chair with the entire courtroom watching. The prosecutor was a woman in her 40s named Sarah Jenkins, sharp-eyed and efficient. "Mr. Pierce, can you tell the court about June of last year when your daughter returned to your home?" I told the story, all of it. Natalie's phone call after 13 years of distance, Caleb in the wheelchair supposedly paralyzed. My joy at having my family back. The symptoms that started in January, dizziness, confusion, exhaustion. The morning I nearly died in the garage. The defense attorney tried to rattle me during cross-examination. "Mr. Pierce, isn't it true that you cut your daughter off financially 13 years ago?" "I refused to enable her relationship with an abusive man," I replied. "I wanted her to build her own life, not depend on my money." "And didn't that refusal drive her away, force her into poverty?" "She chose to leave. I never stopped loving her." The attorney pressed harder. "Mr. Pierce, you have a $160 million estate. Don't you think it's understandable that a struggling single mother might feel desperate? Desperate enough to murder me?" I looked at the jury. "No. I don't think that's understandable at all." The prosecutor called Caleb next. My grandson walked to the stand with his head high, looking impossibly young in his button-down shirt and tie. The bailiff had to adjust the microphone down to his height. "Caleb," the prosecutor said gently, Can you tell us why you pretended to be paralyzed? Caleb's voice was steady. My mom told me I had to. She said if I didn't help her, she'd leave me. She said we needed Grandpa's money to survive. When did you realize your mother was planning to hurt your grandfather? In October. I heard her talking on the phone about insurance money, about making it look like an accident, so I started recording everything. The prosecutor played the recordings for the jury. Natalie's voice filled the courtroom. We'll make it look like an accident. CO poisoning is perfect. Everyone will think it was the old house faulty detectors, tragic but natural. Several jury members looked sick. The defense attorney was careful with Caleb during cross-examination. Attacking a 12-year-old wouldn't play well. But she tried anyway. Caleb didn't. You love your mother. Yes, Caleb said quietly. But she was going to kill my grandpa. I couldn't let her do that. And now she's facing life in prison because of you. How does that make you feel? Caleb's eyes filled with tears, but his voice stayed firm. Sad. But I'd do it again. Because it was the right thing. The courtroom was silent. Spencer Caldwell took the stand the next day. He looked terrible. His expensive suit couldn't hide the weight loss, the dark circles under his eyes, the tremor in his hands. He told the jury everything. How Natalie had approached him with the plan. How she'd seduced him, convinced him they'd split the insurance money. How she'd been obsessed with every detail, planning for months. She was the mastermind, Spencer insisted. I just went along with it. I was weak. But this was all her idea. He was trying to save himself, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. The jury looked disgusted. Then the prosecution called a witness I hadn't expected, Scott Reynolds. Natalie's ex-husband walked into the courtroom, looking weathered and tired. He was 43 but looked older, with the kind of hard edges that come from a difficult life. Mr. Reynolds, the prosecutor said, you were married to Natalie Pierce for 5 years. Yes, ma'am. Can you describe her character during that time? Scott didn't hesitate. Natalie was never satisfied. No matter how hard I worked, how much money I made, it was never enough. She wanted the big house, the expensive cars, the lifestyle she thought she deserved. Did she ever discuss her father's wealth? Constantly. She was obsessed with it. Said her dad owed her, that he'd stolen her inheritance by cutting her off. She talked about how different life would be when he finally died and left her everything. Natalie shook her head frantically at the defense table, mouthing, No, that's not true. But the damage was done. Finally, Natalie herself took the stand. She wore a simple blue dress, no jewelry, her hair pulled back in a modest ponytail. She looked vulnerable, frightened. Her defense attorney led her through a carefully rehearsed story. Natalie, did you love your father? Yes. Her voice broke. I've always loved him. I made mistakes when I was younger, but coming home, I just wanted to make things right. Why did you agree to Spencer Caldwell's plan? I didn't. Tears streamed down her face. Spencer manipulated me. He said he loved me, that we'd be together. He's the one who researched the carbon monoxide, who set up the insurance policy. I was desperate and stupid, and I let him convince me. It was a good performance. If I hadn't known the truth, if I hadn't heard her voice on those recordings, hadn't felt the effects of her poison, hadn't nearly died in her trap, I might have believed her. But I knew better, and as I watched her cry, I realized I was looking at a stranger. The daughter I'd loved was gone, if she'd ever really existed at all. The prosecutor's closing argument was devastating. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Natalie Pierce spent months planning her father's murder. She researched poisons. She installed a carbon monoxide trap. She manipulated her own 12-year-old son into participating in her scheme. She did all of this not out of desperation, not because she was manipulated, but because she was greedy. She wanted her father's $160 million estate, and she was willing to kill him to get it. The defense tried to salvage their case. This is a woman who was drowning in debt, who felt she had no other options. Yes, she made terrible choices. But this wasn't cold-blooded murder. This was desperation driven to its breaking point. The jury left to deliberate at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Caleb and I waited in a small conference room down the hall. Detective Brennan brought us coffee. Ronald Cooper stopped by to offer support. The minutes crawled past like hours. At 7 o'clock, we got word the jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled again. Natalie was brought back to the defense table. The judge took his seat. My heart hammered so hard, I thought everyone could hear it. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. The foreman stood, a middle-aged woman with gray hair and kind eyes. "We have your honor. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find—" The courtroom held its breath. "We find the defendant, Natalie Pierce, guilty." The word echoed through the room. Guilty. 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 Natalie collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Her attorneys tried to comfort her, but she was beyond consolation. Spencer Caldwell tried separately, but convicted earlier that week would face his own sentencing soon. People around me were standing talking, congratulating the prosecutor. Caleb leaned against me, trembling. I put my arm around him and just sat there numb. It was over. The trial, the waiting, the uncertainty. My daughter had been convicted of trying to murder me, and she would go to prison for the rest of her life. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. "Grandpa," Caleb looked up at me. "Is it really over?" I pulled him close. "Yes," I whispered. "It's over." Late May, we returned to the courthouse for sentencing. The same building, the same courtroom, but everything felt different. The trial was over. The jury had spoken. Today was about consequences. Caleb sat beside me, his hand gripping mine. He'd been quiet all morning, barely touching breakfast. Neither of us had slept well. At 10 o'clock, they brought Natalie and Spencer into the courtroom. Natalie wore the same orange jumpsuit, her hair unwashed, face puffy from crying. Spencer looked diminished somehow. They didn't look at each other. Judge Margaret Wilson entered, 62, steel-gray hair, known for fairness tempered with strictness. She'd presided over the trial with quiet authority. "Ma, please be seated." Heavy silence settled over the courtroom. "I have reviewed the evidence, the jury's verdict, and the sentencing recommendations," Judge Wilson said. "I have also considered the victim impact statements." She paused, letting the weight settle. "This is among the most calculated and cruel cases I have seen in 30 years on the bench. Mrs. Pierce, you spent months planning your father's murder. You poisoned him systematically. You manipulated your own child. You showed no remorse, no hesitation." Natalie stared at the table, tears streaming silently. "Mr. Caldwell, you enabled and assisted in this conspiracy. You researched methods of murder. You helped plan the timeline. You stood to profit from an innocent man's death." Spencer remained expressionless. "Before sentencing, I will hear victim impact statements. Mr. Pierce, you may approach." I stood and walked to the podium. I'd written a statement, but the words seemed inadequate now. I cleared my throat. "Your Honor, 11 months ago, my daughter called me after 13 years. I thought it was a miracle. I thought I was getting my family back." My voice caught. I forced myself to continue. "Instead, she came home to kill me. For 4 months, she poisoned my coffee every morning. She smiled, told me she loved me, and put drugs in everything I consumed. She made me think I was losing my mind. She installed a carbon monoxide trap in my garage, planning to make my death look like an accident so she could collect $25 million. I looked at Natalie. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Well, the worst part isn't that she tried to kill me. The worst part is that she used my grandson to do it. Caleb is 12 years old. She manipulated him, forced him to pretend to be paralyzed, made him complicit in her scheme. I paused. I don't sleep well anymore. I don't trust easily. Every relationship has been colored by knowing my own daughter was willing to murder me for money. My hands gripped the podium. But I also want to say this: Natalie is still my daughter. I don't say that to excuse what she did. I say it because it makes it hurt more. I will grieve for the rest of my life, not just for what I lost, but for what she chose to become. I looked at the judge. She needs to face the full consequences, not just for my sake, but for Caleb's. He needs to know that even when it's hard, we do what's right. We choose love and honesty over greed and violence. I sat down, hands shaking. Judge Wilson nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce." She looked at Caleb. "Young man, would you like to say anything?" Caleb glanced at me. I squeezed his hand, and he stood. He walked to the podium looking impossibly small. The bailiff adjusted the microphone down. "My name is Caleb. I'm 12 years old." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. "My mom told me I had to help her. She said if I didn't, she'd leave me alone. I was scared." He paused, but then I figured out she was going to hurt my grandpa, and I knew I couldn't let her do that, even if it meant losing her forever. Tears rolled down his cheeks. My mom used me. She lied to me. That hurt a lot. He looked at me. "But my grandpa saved me. He's my family now. He's the only family I have. And I'm glad I told the truth, even though it was really hard." The courtroom was silent as Caleb returned. I pulled him close, and he buried his face against my shoulder. "Thank you, Caleb. That took great courage," Judge Wilson said softly. She turned back to the defendants. "I have made my decision. Natalie Pierce, please stand." Natalie stood, her lawyer supporting her elbow. She was crying openly. "Natalie Pierce, you have been convicted of attempted murder in the first-degree conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and child endangerment. Given the calculated nature of your crime, your lack of remorse, and the profound harm you inflicted, I sentence you to 25 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary without possibility of parole." 25 years. Natalie collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Her attorney tried to comfort her. "Spencer Caldwell, please stand." Spencer rose mechanically. "Spencer Caldwell, you have been convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. While you were not the primary architect, your participation was essential and willing. I sentence you to 15 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary, with possibility of parole after 10 years. Spencer showed no reaction. "This court is adjourned." The gavel struck. Officers moved forward. Natalie was still crying, her body shaking. Then she looked up, eyes finding mine. "You did this," she screamed. "You ruined my life. If you'd just given me the money, if you'd helped me instead of judging me, none of this would have happened." I stood and walked closer. "I would have given you anything if you'd asked," I said quietly. "All you had to do was tell me you were in trouble. I would have paid your debts, found you help, supported you however you needed." "You would have judged me," she spat. "Maybe," I admitted, "but I never stopped loving you. I never stopped wanting the best for you." I took a breath. "You chose this, Natalie. You chose greed over family. You chose to kill me instead of trusting me. Those were your decisions, not mine." "I hate you," she whispered. The words should have hurt, but right now I just felt empty. I loved you, I said. I still do. You're my daughter, and you always will be. But I can't save you from the consequences of what you've done. Only you could have prevented this by choosing differently. An officer took Natalie's arm. I'll get out, she said. And when I do, in 25 years you'll be 51. I'll be 93 if I'm even still alive. By then maybe you'll understand what you threw away. Dad! Her voice broke. For just a moment I saw my little girl. Scared. Lost. Please. But there was nothing I could do. Goodbye, Natalie. The officers led her away. She was screaming, crying my name, begging. Her voice echoed until finally a door closed, and there was silence. Spencer was led out separately, head down, showing no emotion. I stood in that empty courtroom, feeling drained. Caleb appeared at my side, slipping his hand into mine. Grandpa, are you okay? I looked down at him, this brave boy who'd saved my life. I don't know, I said honestly. But we'll be okay, together. He leaned against me. You're my only family now. I pulled him into a tight embrace. And you're mine. You saved my life, Caleb. You're the bravest person I know. You saved me too, he whispered. We stood holding each other. Detective Brennan appeared in the doorway, waiting respectfully. Ronald Cooper stood behind her and Carol Anderson. Come on, I said to Caleb. Let's go home. We walked out together. Outside, Portland's rain had started the light, misty drizzle that makes everything soft and gray. The rain that had been falling the night Natalie first called me 11 months ago. So much had changed. I'd lost my daughter not to death, but to something worse. To greed and lies and violence. But I'd also saved something precious. Caleb was alive, safe, healing. And we had each other. We walked toward the car hand in hand. Rain fell gently on our shoulders. Grandpa, Caleb said, what happens now? I thought about that question. Natalie would serve 25 years, Spencer 15. Justice had been served, but justice wasn't the same as healing. That would take longer, now. I said, we go home. We have dinner. We watch a movie. And tomorrow we wake up and keep going, one day at a time. Together. Together, I promised. Always. We reached the car. Before opening the door, I looked back at the courthouse one last time. Somewhere in there, my daughter sat in chains. The little girl who'd once climbed into my lap. The young woman who'd walked away 13 years ago. The person who'd tried to murder me. She was all of those people, and none of them. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again. I didn't know if I wanted to, but I knew this: I'd survived. Caleb had survived. We had each other. And somehow that would have to be enough. I opened the car door. Caleb climbed in, and I followed. We drove away from the courthouse, away from the trial, away from Natalie, toward home, toward whatever came next. Together. 1 year later, May again. And everything was different. I stood in the kitchen of our new house in Northwest Portland, a modest craftsman home with big windows and a backyard garden. Nothing like the Victorian mansion where it had all happened. We'd moved 6 months ago, and neither of us looked back. Caleb sat at the kitchen table eating cereal, scrolling through something on his laptop. He was 13 now, taller voice, deeper, wearing new glasses that made him look older. "Morning, Grandpa," he said. "Morning," I replied, pouring coffee. Real coffee. No poison. Just the brew I'd always loved, now safe again. The hotel chain sold last October for $120 million. I kept enough to live comfortably and ensure Caleb's future. The rest went into the Pierce Foundation for Child Protection funding shelters for abused children, therapy programs, legal aid for families escaping violence. It had been Caleb's idea. We should help other kids like me, he'd said, so they don't have to be as scared. Ronald Cooper managed the foundation's finances. Carol Anderson sat on the board. Detective Brennan consulted on safety protocols. In 6 months, we'd helped 200 children. Something good from something terrible. Ready for school? I asked. Caleb nodded, closing his laptop. Robotics Club has regionals today. He'd discovered a gift for technology, coding, programming, building apps that amazed his teachers. His robotics team had gone undefeated. Last month, a Portland State instructor called to say Caleb was one of the most talented young minds he'd encountered. I'll never understand what you're building, I admitted. But I'm proud of you. He grinned. You just have to drive me there. We had routines now. Breakfast together. I drove him to school, managed foundation business, worked in the garden. Evenings we cooked dinner and watched movies. Simple, normal things that felt impossible 18 months ago. We went to therapy every week, Caleb on Tuesdays, me on Wednesdays, together on Thursdays with Dr. Sarah Mitchell. At first, neither of us wanted to go, but Dr. Mitchell was patient, and slowly we learned to talk about what happened. Caleb talked about fear of losing his mother, keeping secrets, guilt over being part of her plan. He had nightmares sometimes, and I'd sit with him until he fell back asleep. I talked about betrayal, lost trust, grief of losing my daughter while she was still alive, the anger that flared, sometimes the sadness that never quite left. You're both healing, Dr. Mitchell told us last week. It takes time, but you're getting there. Together. Together. That word meant everything now. Ronald visited monthly for dinner and chess. Carol stopped by occasionally with cookies. Detective Brennan checked in every few months. We had a community who cared. 3 months ago, a letter arrived from Oregon State Penitentiary. Natalie's handwriting. My hands shook opening it. Dear Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need to say this. I'm sorry. For everything. The lies, the poison, the betrayal. Using Caleb. Trying to kill you. I was drowning in debt and desperation. And instead of asking for help, I chose the worst path. I think about what I did every day. I see your face in that garage. Caleb's face when they took me away. I destroyed everything that mattered. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know I loved you. I still do. I just lost sight of what that meant. I hope you and Caleb are happy. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I love him. Natalie. I read it 3 times, then put it in a drawer. I hadn't responded. Maybe someday I would. Maybe I'd visit her in prison, find some way to offer forgiveness. But not yet. The wounds were still too fresh. Last month, the adoption was finalized. Different courthouse, different judge. A hearing that lasted 20 minutes. When she signed the papers making Caleb legally my son, we both cried. You're my son now, I told him, holding him tight. You've always been my grandpa, he said. This just makes it official. He chose to keep the name Pierce. I like that we match. So now he was Caleb Pierce, legally and permanently my son. Last night, while doing homework, Caleb looked up suddenly. Grandpa, can I ask you something? Always. He set down his pencil. You trusted my mom. You believed her when she came back. And she tried to kill you. How do you trust anyone again after that? I thought carefully. This was important. Trust is a gift we give, I said slowly. Not because people deserve it, but because we deserve to believe in goodness. Your mother broke that trust. And yes, it hurt. It still hurts. I paused. But you restored it. You showed me that love is real, that courage exists, that people will do the right thing when it matters. You proved trust is worth the risk. His eyes were wet. What if I turn out like her? You won't, I said firmly. You already proved that. When faced with the same choice, money and lies or love and truth, you chose love. That's who you are. I'm scared sometimes that I'll mess up. Everyone's scared of that, I told him. But you're one of the bravest, kindest people I know, and I trust you completely. He smiled. I trust you too, Grandpa. Now standing in our kitchen this May morning, watching Caleb gather his school things, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Not happiness exactly. The sadness would never fully go away. But peace. The knowledge we'd survived the worst and come through together. I'll be in the car, Caleb called. I grabbed my keys and followed. Portland's rain was falling, that soft, misty drizzle making everything green. I thought about that night 18 months ago. The phone ringing. Natalie's voice. Dad, I need to come home. If I could go back to that moment knowing everything that would happen, would I still answer yes? Without hesitation, yes. Because answering brought Caleb into my life, showed me what real family means, not blood, but choice. Not obligation, but love. I'd lost a daughter, but I'd gained a son who chose me as much as I chose him. That evening, we cooked dinner together. Caleb was teaching me his favorite pasta dish from YouTube. I kept messing up the timing, and he kept laughing. Grandpa, you're terrible at this, he said, grinning. I'm aware, but I'm trying. That's all that matters. We ate at the kitchen table talking about his competition, second place, his English assignment, Fahrenheit 451, and whether we should get a dog, maybe not yet. Normal conversation, normal life. After dinner, we washed dishes side by side. Through the window, I could see rain falling on our garden, on Portland's lights glowing in the distance. Caleb was explaining his coding project, gesturing with soapy hands, excited and animated. I didn't understand half of it, but I loved watching him light up. This was family. This was home, not the mansion with its dark history, not the empire I'd built. Just this, a modest house, a 13-year-old teaching his grandfather to cook, rain on the windows, laughter filling the rooms. We'd survived the darkness, found our way to light. Grandpa, Caleb said, drying the last plate. Thanks. For what? For everything. For believing me. For keeping me safe. For being my family. I pulled him into a hug. Thank you for saving my life. For being brave. For being exactly who you are. We settled on the couch with popcorn for movie night. Caleb leaned against my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around him as rain drummed softly on the roof. 18 months ago, I'd been dying poisoned by someone I loved, trapped in a conspiracy I didn't know existed. Now I was alive. Caleb was alive. We were healing, growing, building a future together. The past would always be part of us. The scars would always be there. But we'd learned to carry them without letting them define us. We'd learned that family isn't who you're born to. It's who you choose and who chooses you back. We'd learned that love is worth the risk even when it hurts. And we'd learned that sometimes the worst moments lead us to the people we were always meant to find. I looked down at Caleb, absorbed in the movie, safe and happy and home. Yes, I thought, I would answer that phone call again. Every single time. Because this right here, right now, was worth everything. Somewhere in a prison 3 hours away, my daughter was serving her sentence, maybe thinking about us, maybe regretting her choices. But right now, I had everything that mattered. We were going to be okay. Looking back at this family story, I realized trust is both our greatest strength and our deepest vulnerability. I trusted my daughter completely, and she used that trust to try to kill me. My advice: don't be like me. Don't ignore the warning signs. When Carol said something felt wrong, when Caleb's eyes watched too carefully, when my coffee tasted just slightly bitter, I dismissed it all. Because I wanted to believe in the family story I'd imagined, the reconciliation, the second chance, the happy ending. But here's what I learned. Family story isn't about blood. It's about choice. Caleb chose to save me. Natalie chose greed. And in the end, real family is the one that chooses love over money, truth over lies, courage over fear. Some call what I did dad revenge, turning my daughter over to the police. But it wasn't revenge. It was justice. It was protecting Caleb. It was refusing to let evil win just because it wore a familiar face. Dad revenge might sound satisfying, but what I felt was only heartbreak. True dad revenge would have been letting anger consume me. Instead, I chose healing. God gave me a second chance through Caleb, a boy who reminded me that goodness still exists, even in darkness. And if there's one lesson from all this, protect yourself, but don't let betrayal steal your capacity to love. Natalie is in prison. Spencer is in prison. And I'm here with Caleb, building a new life from the ashes of the old one. We're healing. We're surviving. We're learning that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. Trust carefully. Love deeply. And never ignore your instincts when something feels wrong. Because the person who seems perfect might be the one planning your death. Thank you for walking this journey with me to the very end. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you found yourself in Bradley's position, facing betrayal from someone you loved, what would you do? Your perspective truly matters to me. If this story resonated with you emotionally, please consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. A gentle note: while inspired by real themes of family betrayal and trust, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling impact. If this content doesn't align with your preferences, feel free to explore other videos that might suit you better.